Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 87th live stream for the MisfitGamersStudios. I'm your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. That was a terrible intro. I am sorry. I am tired, y'all. It has been a hell of a weekend. Give me 1 second. We're going to redo that intro for the posterity of YouTube in the future. Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 87th live stream for the MisfitGamersStudios. I'm your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. On today's episode of Homebrew Review, I'm going to be looking at an item that Kage gave me. He gave it to me a while back. It was kind of always going to be too short to be its own episode, but since he's not here today, and I'm extremely tired from all the work that I've been doing around the house and the studio, that we are going to kind of review this one. It's going to be pretty short, but I also wanted to talk about this one specifically on its own episode because when he submitted it, I kind of joked with him a little bit that this item basically already exists in High Point, and not only that, but one of his characters actually knows about it and actually has it. So we kind of discussed a little bit of it off stream anyway. So yeah, I wanted to basically take this opportunity to discuss, obviously do the review of the item that he submitted. That should be pretty quick. And then I kind of want to just go over the item that I have, that I built, talk about, the inspiration behind it, where I got it from, how I decided, to build it and make it. So kind of more of a, homebrew review and a showcase. And then we'll probably end it there. So I'm hoping we can make an hour. That might be a bit of a stretch. So we will see. What's going on, Cosmic? Nice to see you today. Yeah, I don't have any other updates for you guys. It's been just kind of crazy around here recently. Been doing a lot of work outside. We have about a 40, 50 foot retaining wall. That's about 4 foot high that I've been demolishing for the last 3 days. So that's been taking a lot out of me, but it's almost gone. Well, it's all demolished. It's basically down, and about half the rubble is in the container out front. So I have to, I have till Friday to get all of the concrete out of here. So I have about half a retaining wall's worth of concrete on my on my backyard floor that I have to go take all the way to the front yard. So that is where all my energy is right now. That and then just all of the plans for the backyard and everything else that we're doing. So yeah, I'm pretty zapped right now. But yeah, since Kage is not here anyway, it wasn't going to be, a huge deep dive episode since Homebrew Review typically isn't. But I did want to do something a little bit other than a high-low because we've been doing just so many of those. Since whenever he's not here, that's kind of the default, and I kind of wanted to break it up a little bit and do a little bit more of High Point showcasing. So yeah, we'll take a look at that. If you're low on content to talk about, yeah, it's not so much that I'm low on content to talk about. I'm low on energy to talk about content. So yeah, today is just going to be focusing on this item that Kage submitted, and then I will talk about the item that already exists in High Point that basically represents this, or is pretty much identical. And then yeah, I will probably cut it there to give myself some rest because I have so much more work and very little time to do it in. But join me for today's High Point Homebrew Review. Maybe it should be called High Point Review. I don't know. High Point Review sounds a little bit weird. It's a little bit audacious. Oh, let's go. What do I need? Everything's working right now. Boom. Here we go. Do like that my camera stays. All right, so this is one that Kage had found. I don't even know where he found it. We didn't even bother really translating it just because it came on this page. I think he stumbled across this online or on, via I think maybe a TikTok or a reel or something else like that. So yeah, wanted to look at it online because yeah, it's not going to take very long to go through. Literally, yeah, I'm going to be pushing hard for an hour. I got to slow down a little bit, but yeah, he submitted this item, and it was just kind of funny because it was at first glance, it was just yeah, that already exists. Be mindful, this was back before we actually had the process of formatting it and everything. So me having looked at it previously, especially because it was one of his own submissions, was kind of before a lot of our decisions before, for the other points of High Point. So keeping consistency is important here. But let's go ahead. We don't have an author for this one. We don't know who created it. I don't even think Kage remembers where he got this from. I think he had saved the screenshot of this and that's just kind of what we have. So yeah, submitted by Kage, we have the Ring of Finger Guns, a wondrous item with a rare rarity. All right, so description. Always love a bit of lore in the description. You lock eyes with Todd from accounting. Between the two of you is the last cruller. It glistens with a sugary glaze. Your fingers point toward, and you raise your thumb. A moment passes. Todd reaches for the cruller. You drop your thumb, and he blasts across the room. You blow smoke from the tip of your finger. It didn't have to end this way, Todd. We could have shared that cruller. You take a bite. Delicious. Putting on the Ring of Finger Guns allows you to shoot one dart of magic missile from your fingers, dealing 1d4 plus 1 force damage to a creature within 120 feet. You can shoot a magic dart as either an action or a bonus action. The Ring of Finger Guns contains 3 charges for magical darts, and those charges are regained at midnight. You must make pew pew or similar gunshot noises for the Ring of Finger Guns to activate. So I do always kind of like that. I do always kind of like an activation command word, especially when it falls right into the purpose of the item. So that's cute. I think right off the bat, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I would probably... So when it comes to what it can do, right? Looking at the range, I would probably say 120 feet was something that you can see. Now, when it comes to the force damage, because this is just... Because it says you can do it as an action or a bonus action, that tells me that if I have 3 charges and I use an action or I use my bonus action to use it, that means that as long as I still have a charge, I could use it again on my turn. I basically could use this twice in one turn using an action and a bonus action. So I think it would be better just to say one or the other instead of either. I mean, it says either, so maybe that just is indicating that on a single turn you have to choose, but I'm pretty sure that if you just make it a bonus action, you can pretty much do any bonus action on an action if you choose. Like it would just be a downgrade. I'm pretty sure that's not a problem. So I don't know. Maybe I would just keep it as a bonus action. I think for the damage though, I think for just a magic item, a 1d4 plus 1. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. In my mind, something like this, more like a gag item, seems to be better if it were lower damage in terms of not actually being super useful in combat. So part of me wants to say that a 1d4 minus 1 of force damage would be more beneficial, but I guess at the same time that would render it almost useless for the most part. That would kind of basically just be that would be more of a role play item. So 1d4 plus 1 I think works. I wouldn't, especially with 3 times a day, I don't know if I would want to go any higher than that. I don't know if I would really justify a 1d6 for this particular item. So yeah, I could see a 1d4. I do like the idea that it is magic missile. So I mean, that's probably where they're getting the 1d4 plus 1 from, I think. So it always hits your target, especially if you can see them. So I don't necessarily mind that. And because magic missile, you get additional missiles per level, so this only gives you a cap of 3, but you can't do them all at once. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah, okay. I don't think, since it's pretty much targeting one creature instead of magic missile can target up to normal a number of creatures, and the idea that this is either an action or a bonus action, it leads me to believe that the intent would be to give you the option to do this twice in a round, which, I mean, realistically, again, depending on how what level you're at, that could basically just be magic missile, the spell magic missile. So since you're using your action and your bonus action for it, I don't think that's really overpowered at all. It also really depends on what level you'd be getting this at. I mean, it is a wondrous item, but I mean, at this point, I could probably see this going to a level 3 or level 4. Depends on the campaign. I would like to see it more closer to level 6, but I could see a lot of campaigns working with this on a lower level just to give, an extra option to certain characters, especially especially ones that are more supportive characters. That could be a really good supportive character item. Yeah, not Not terrible. I think it's cute. I think it's a good idea. I think more. I don't want to. Maybe subtle magic items like this. I don't call them subtle, as in, it has a command word. You have to do something. So it's not so subtle as in like not knowing what is happening, but subtle's not the right word. Basically, just I kind of like these not quite useless magical items, but not quite, game dominating magical items. Because a lot of the times when you get a magical item, it seems to be the cornerstone of something. It's either, I don't want to say game breaking, but it's an elevation of what your character can do, or an elevation into like a new level or a new type of gameplay, right? But with things like this, these are kind of those things that you would just like to carry around, and even if you outpower it in the sense that you could do other things that would do more damage, it still maintains its usefulness in multiple situations. Not because it's not just focused on being like a weapon, right? This could actually be used for multiple situations. I mean, 1d4 plus 1 force damage is enough to move a lever, or I would say even like especially like if you have a rope that's like starting to thread and almost going to break, I would say that much damage might give it enough force to snap, things like that, right? It makes someone trip or slip, pushing, since it's force damage too, 1d4, you could push that into sails and give it like a gust of wind or something like that. It wouldn't be like sustained or anything, but situationally, I think that this is one of those types of items that, although you could utilize it a lot at early levels, it wouldn't lose its effectiveness, or it would lose effectiveness, but it wouldn't lose its ability to be effective. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I think that over time it would maintain its usefulness, even though its initial benefits may not be there, right? Like at early levels, this could be a decent amount of damage to do as a bonus action. However, at later levels, it may not be its primary focus to help you in combat, but it still has a use that you would find at those higher levels. That's kind of what I was trying to say. So yeah, I don't think it's that bad. I did see your stuff in there, Cosmic. I did mention a couple other things, but I did see that you posted a little bit more. But yeah, I did comment a little bit on like your thing. But yeah, let me know what you want an opinion on, and I'll probably get to that tomorrow in between after I get off work, and probably have to do a bit of work in the yard. But yeah, let me know which one that you needed my opinion on specifically. So for... man, we are not making good time. So for the Ring of Finger Guns, I really do like it. I think that more items like this deserve to have more showtime. I think that too many times people look for the most powerful or the most flashy magical items, or they try to go far too... I don't want to call it trolly, but they try to find items that really don't have much of a use, but it's there just to either disrupt gameplay or to make a spectacle, but doesn't really do anything. I think this is a good blend of both of those. It can keep its usefulness over time, but it will never take the show. It will just enhance whatever's happening or going on. Oh, the Wall of Stone having a chance to have fossils. I've been thinking about that. I haven't really come to a conclusion on my thoughts on that. I think I'm just kind of sitting on the fact that sounds very campaign based. It sounds very like specific to a setting. Like I try to apply it to like High Point, and while I could see the benefits depending on what the characters are trying to do, on average, trying to apply that as a like let's say a mechanic to the average gameplay, I struggle to see a lot of benefits. But I think in the right setting with the right concept of what it could pull in terms of like history or what type of creatures it could pull from, I do see that there could be some unique ideas. I think it could kind of be a unique idea to maybe just randomly be able to roll for treasure if you get certain things for that, like you unearth artifacts or something like that. But I have to like actually reread it a couple times and sit down to figure out like your version of it, coming from the perspective of how you wrote it. And I need to actually sit down and like figure out, a better articulated way of saying that. Cause I just first read through, I didn't really see much use beyond if it matters in your setting. And if you have like reasons to be able to find those. But I will put probably something better in Discord once I've, slept and had some rest. But yeah, so for the Ring of Finger Guns, I like it. I think it's good. So I have to obviously take 1 point off because I can't use it because I already have it. I already have something similar. So that takes a point off. I take another point off because it doesn't inspire me because I already have something like it. And I think mine's better, but it's just, not necessarily better. Mine just does something. It serves a different purpose. And then it would probably take a couple different things. Like I would probably, for this particular item, I would make some adjustments, but realistically, it falls kind of similar to what I have, so we'll get into that. But yeah, I would say it's probably a solid 7 out of 10. I'll probably, I'll just give it 7 out of 10. It's not bad. I think I definitely won't knock it down any further because I do like these kind of lesser magical items. And yeah, I think that more things like this should exist. And even if I didn't already have this in High Point, I would probably change up just how this reads in order to adopt it if I didn't already have my own version. But yeah, I like it. I would use it. I think that if I had a character with this, I don't think this is one of those items I would never get rid of. I would always have this on me, and I would always try to see like what exactly I could pull off with it. So yeah, I like it. Not too bad. I'll go ahead and make sure that I let Kage know. Oh, that is going to be a 7 out of 10 for that. Okay, that almost got us to a half hour. I was hoping it would go a little bit longer, but that's all right. So the reason why this was kind of interesting that he brought this one up is because I have a very similar item. Let's go back to here. I have a very similar item that I had already made in High Point. Now, I didn't make it like necessarily from scratch. It wasn't a unique item. It wasn't like my own creation. It was an item that exists because of a specific. It was an item that exists because of a specific NPC that exists in High Point. So when I have, all of my influences and everything coming in, I like to make NPCs that also represent aspects of those influences. So I've mentioned before that the Dresden Files was a huge influence for High Point, and to this day still remains a big aspect of some of the mechanics, some of the plot lines and story twists and things that I have going on, and just a lot of the NPCs that I've created. So I do have a version, not a one-to-one recreation, as in I don't, and anyway, I don't want to get into how I do NPCs that much. I've talked about this before, but I do have a version of Dresden in my realm, and Kage's character has met him. They've actually, Kage and Vixie's character, Alo and Safia, in the Old Gods campaign, have met Dresden. And it was also interesting because even though Kage's first character, Davd, has not officially met Dresden as he's been gaming, his character has technically met Dresden before when he was a child. And he actually has something from Dresden in games. So when Davd was first created, when Kage first created this character, he got a couple specific items, and one of the magical items that he was able to receive, because he got like his dad's staff, he had this notebook from his dad, his dad's journal, but he did get to receive one magical item. So the magical item that he got was a gift that was given to his father that was handed down to him. Now, backstory wise, the gift was from Dresden. So Dresden had gifted Dav's father this ring, and it was something that Dresden had been toying with and trying to basically like perfect some things. And because of Dov's family history, being benders and everything, and with the skill sets that Dov's dad had, especially with metallurgy and metal bending, he thought that the ring would be a very unique tool for him, and they also wanted to see, what a bender could do with it. So he had given him one of these, when Dov was a child, and then now fast forward, Dov has this ring and has kind of loosely figured out how to use it. The only difference is that there was a slight mistake at the time that had all happened, and Dresden gave Dov's father a prototype. He gave him the wrong one. He was supposed to give him a standard silver ring, and unfortunately, he gave him one of the very first prototypes of this ring, and that was made with a very, very unique and special type of material that is basically what created the concept of the ring. But yeah, basically that was a mistake. Dresden never actually knew, still doesn't to this day, know what happened to that ring. As far as he knows, it just he had misplaced it, lost it, got stolen, but he has not figured out what happened to that ring, and Dov still has it to this day. So being a prototype, it doesn't work as specifically as the standard one that Dresden would carry. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Dresden Files, the Dresden Files book series, I don't really know how much I'm going to be able to summarize for you, but for those of you who do know, you guys will recognize this. But basically, main character is a wizard. He's able to do many different types of magic, and one thing that he can do is create basically magical items, enchanted items, things like that. And when it comes down to the particular rings in the book series, he has basically what he calls rings of energy storage, or energy storing rings. I don't know if he actually has, I can't remember if he has like a specific name for them, but basically he was able to create rings that will store little tiny bits of energy that he could release later. So from the book, basically the rings are enchanted and imbued with runes all around them, and what they do is when they're worn, they will store a very small amount of kinetic energy as the wearer just goes about their day. So, swinging arms, lifting things, picking things up, just generally moving about, like just what you do. And the idea is that the ring siphons off just a small amount of that kinetic energy over time, and then just stores it. In the book series, he starts off with a single copper ring, but then eventually he does upgrade to better materials. I think he actually gets silver rings in the series, and then eventually he learns that he can do a banded ring. So he takes three rings, twists them together, and he's actually basically able to make that banded ring, 3 times as powerful as a standard ring. So that's where that comes in from the book. Essentially, that these are kind of, last-ditch effort ideas. These are things that would, he uses these rings essentially just, kind of not planning to, because the idea is, you just kind of forget about them, and when you need them, there's just going to be a lot of force to come out. It's not really something that you can calculate. So they're definitely not something that we see a lot of, but when they do come out, is always extremely spectacular. What's going on, Pokeniner? How you doing? Nice to see you in chat. And yeah, we don't really ever get in the book series, we don't get any kind of calculation or measurement. He has been seen using them, and we do know that over potentially months, what he can do is he'd be able to take down basically like a portcullis worth of doors. Like if you think about just the large, wooden doors that are, a foot thick or so. I think we've seen in the book after like 8 months of wearing a ring, he can basically blast one of those into splinters. I think he's mentioned testing it and being able to, blow out candles after a couple days. I think he's been able to put out like larger fires after a couple weeks, and eventually, just be, over months and years. I don't think we ever, I think he made reference once in a book about having like spent over a year not using it. And when he did, it was, near catastrophic, but I don't think we ever. I think that was just more to indicate that he has to be just mindful of how much energy he stores into it. But again, we never really got like an equation to it. So I wanted to basically take that when Doft was having his character made. I kind of wanted to just slip that in because I thought it would be a very unique magical item for him to kind of just play with and figure out over time, because at first he didn't know what it could do. So it was more of a play around and find out kind of thing. But the major difference between the one that he has and the one from the book is basically how it stores the energy and how much you can get out of it. So what I ended up doing is taking a page from Dresden's book, if you will, and I looked at the idea that at first Dresden started out with copper and then eventually went to silver and eventually to banded. So obviously that would tell me that a translation to D&D makes sense, that the material would be a big indication. Excuse me. So being that the material will indicate how it would change, I have a difference between material in terms of the amount of energy that you can store. I have figured out a rough design for how much energy and how much time it takes based off of my own personal viewpoints on what I believe essentially like how much force I believe certain things would take. And so then what I did was I equated how much force I think certain things would take, and then how long do I think the residual tiny amount of kinetic energy given off by a hand would take, how long would it take to feed that, that equal amount, right? So I started with off like how much, effort do I think it would be to, turn the page of a book? How much force, how much force damage? And I say force damage, but it's more about how much, force would it take to turn a page of a book, blow out a candle, blow out a torch, blow out a fire, blow someone off their feet, or like knock a cane out from under somebody. How much would it be to, move loose gravel? How much would it, so those are the kind of steps that I started taking and figuring out, like, okay, now that I have an idea of how much, out of damage wise in D&D, like, taking a damage die out, or taking a damage die and thinking about how much force damage is equal to those stages, right? Like, I don't think there's much damage in the force damage to blow out a candle, right? So I was like, okay, if blowing out a candle isn't technically damage inducing, but you would think like the amount of force that you have to take out to like blow out like a fire or like a torch, right? A well-lit torch or a fire pit. I mean, the amount that you would have to push to actually blow it out would also be enough to disrupt the, the materials inside of it. It'd disrupt the wood, so you look at that as, okay, that would probably actually equate to actual damage. It would probably, knock someone on their feet or, knock things into their face. Basically, that's where you start to see like the level of damage start to increase. So that's kind of what I started looking at. And basically what I came down to, based on my version of the Dresden ring, is that the standard version, not the one that Doft has, but the standard version stores 1d6 worth of force energy. So it's a 1d6 of force energy per month of wear. So essentially it comes out to about a 1d3 per 2 weeks. So as you break that down, it basically just gets to, within like a week, it's maybe a point of damage within like a week or so. And then once you get to the 2 weeks, now you're getting to 1 to 2 2 to 3 damage, and then so on. And that way the idea is that within a couple days, right, of wearing this ring, you first put on the ring, it's empty. Within a couple days you can blow out a candle, turn the page of a book. It's going to take you at least a month before you could do anything with this, right? And because we're talking about the tiny little amounts of kinetic energy, right? This isn't meant to be something that's going to go from campaign or from encounter to encounter and be useful. This is definitely one of those, items that very much like, Dresden had originally presented it. It's use it when you need it, because since the last time you needed it, you hopefully have, racked up quite a bit. And then it is also a one and done, unlike the one that we just reviewed where it's a charge base, where it has like 3 charges per day. This one's the one and done. So you rack it up, and then once it's done, it's out. And then I did talk about like how the materials will matter, right? And so I kind of based this off of, again, what I saw in the book and kind of just, what I would envision, what would make sense for a tier structure for the materials in High Point. So copper has a max of 2. So it stores 1d6 per month of wear. So after 2 months, you can get the maximum with copper. So in 2 months, you have the maximum 2d6 worth of damage. With silver, you get 4. With gold, you get 6, and with platinum, you get 8. So a platinum ring would net you 8d6 damage after 8 months of wear. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, especially for, especially how in-game time typically works. That is a very long time, and that is not typically beneficial for most gaming groups, which is why it's not going to be the most beneficial kind of item you would want to throw into every campaign. But again, trying to represent what it was in Dresden, which is just your everyday usage. Trying to represent that into D&D and trying to make it make sense for like one campaign or one encounter to the next, or, just like a short rest. I just feel like it made the item, again, almost like what we saw in this. It made it based off of charges, and it kind of turned it too much into like a magic missile, where I kind of wanted to represent that idea of stored energy and basically being able to just release it all at once, unfettered, and, as needed. So I have played around with the different types. Sometimes, I still will say that this may not be, my final, because sometimes I think that, 2d6 for a copper ring is not a lot, but at the same time, it wouldn't take very much for you to go and upgrade this to Dresden to upgrade that to a silver ring, right? Like it wouldn't really be much. 2d6, 12 points of damage is quite a lot when you think of like busting down a door or, knocking someone on their feet. That's a decent amount, being able to be, thrown at someone, right? And keep in mind too that the even though it's a die roll, so you still may get the minimum damage. The damage doesn't necessarily equal isn't the same equation as the amount of force, right? So you may still be able to get force effects even if you don't do damage to certain creatures. But it's also akin to the idea that it's a different level of movement, each time frame, right? So you may have a gold one with a potentially 6d6, but the reason is maybe 1 month you were, like out of those, 66, right? Because it's a month per die. The idea is that 1 month you may have done very little. So that D6 is going to be a 1 out of 6, but maybe another D6 is, 6 out of 6. And it's because that month, you did a lot. Like the idea behind the die is to represent your general, your general aspect of movement. And for the most part, the standard rings do require you to wear them, and they do require that it's the standard movement. So, aggressive fighting will add a little bit extra, but it doesn't add, substantially more. It is designed to be passive, so the time frame wouldn't change. It's not designed to change just if you intentionally do a lot, but that's why the die roll is there, kind of like, AC. It's taken into account all of those things that you've done over the course of that time frame. So there's that potential maximum, but it just depends on like, what your character's been doing and how it's been collecting the energy. So the difference, however, with the one that Dovt has, like I said, he had a prototype. So his is made of platinum, and it's a very special type of material. It goes into a lot of the like the core history of High Point, but essentially part of the material that made his ring is actually from the anomaly. So that ring definitely has much more potential than the standard ring. So with Dov's, he doesn't have a point limit, which is why it's kind of a dangerous prototype to have, because all of the other ones that Dresden was able to make had specific caps because of the material could only hold so much, whereas this one basically doesn't have that cap. And for all mortal intents and purposes, it's unlimited. So the longer Dovd wears it, the more he will just gain those D6 die. The other difference too is that this particular one also was, as a prototype, made incorrectly and didn't have the limitation on A, needing to be worn, and B, didn't have the limitation on what type of energy it could absorb. So whereas the newest ones have to be worn by the wearer and can really only take only so much in any given movement. So, just doing excessive movements won't charge it necessarily any faster. It'll give it, marginal amounts of boost, but not like substantially enough. You still basically would have to follow the 1d6 per month of wear, right? It's just, again, it's factored into the d6 when you roll for the damage. But with the one that Dovd has, it A, doesn't have to be worn, and B, doesn't actually know the difference. So depending on the type of force that it's given, it can have different charge rates. It's kind of a variable item. It's not really something that has a chart specifically because it's more of a roleplay aspect. It's dependent upon how he decides to use it. And how he decided to use it was quite clever because he did play with it. He did figure out pretty quickly what it was and how it worked. And he found out... again, because my players are so clever, he also decided to start playing with aspects of it. Like I said, he discovered on his own that this one doesn't have the same limitation as the original or as the newer versions, because he played around to try to figure out could it charge if he wasn't wearing it. Of course, he found out that it could, and at that point, he also tested out some things and found out that it does charge slightly faster if it gets more energy. So he thought of a very clever idea. Dovd doesn't wear this item. Since he got it, he has specifically made sure to roleplay almost every gaming session he roleplays and makes sure that he reminds me that he has it on a chain with him at all times, and basically whenever he's idle not doing something, he's just sitting there spinning the chain as just kind of a passive way of thinking. And that's been going on in game for a bit. I don't even know, for Dov's timeline, that's been going on for months after all of his testing. So yeah, dude has racked up quite a bit of energy in his force ring that he doesn't even really understand yet because he has yet to unleash it. But yeah, he's abusing all of the loopholes he was able to find. But again, didn't tell him any of this. These are things that I leave in for my players to find, and if they find them, they are theirs to use. So because this is such a also big plot device, there's obviously a lot more going on with it because of its historical aspects. So it's obvious to be a pretty powerful thing. But again, it's also a one and done. Even though he has all this power, once it's done, all of that time he's put into it is gone. So it's truthfully, in this respect, going to be that kind of like emergency item. And discussing the item itself, I've always kind of wondered, because in the Dresden Files series, they never explain exactly. I mean, they just, chuck it off as magic, right? Magic is why it can store the kinetic energy. Magic is why it can be released. It's just magic. So what I kind of wanted to do with this was explain it a little bit more and give it more of a high point touch in terms of why it works. So one of the aspects that I did was, because it was made with a special material from the anomaly within High Point, I wanted to give it a extra dimensional property. And because of the way that I chose to implement how the anomaly works and why I call it the anomaly and how it actually works within High Point, that extra dimensional property also had extra dimensional properties. Essentially, for those of you who understand how or understand the history of High Point, you guys know that it came from a big portion of it came from the book series from the author Piers Anthony called the Apprentice Adept series. And in that, there are two different worlds: one of Proton, which is all the science, and one of Phase, which is all the magic. So Phase is essentially, as I've gone into with my series of the origins of High Point, Phase is what the anomaly is. The anomaly is essentially Phase. Phase is inside that anomaly, and outside of that anomaly is High Point. Now, for those of you familiar with the book series, Phase is a 2D plane, or like not 2D plane, but Phase is flat. They're not on like a planet or anything. Phase is flat, and that's kind of a big turning point in the series when they kind of discover that. is just, it's kind of like a unique aspect and more of the divergence from the scientific world of Proton, which is a planet in, a universe that they have space travel, they go places. And then here's Phase, where it's literally just a flat plane. You can just, go straight and you'll go everywhere. So it's kind of a unique idea. So I took that because I always wondered, from that book series, I always wondered, like, did anyone ever try to leave Phase? Like, what's in Phase? If Phase is flat and not necessarily a planet, then what happens if you took a rocket ship and blasted off with Phase? And you couldn't do that because, science doesn't work in Phase. So I just always wondered, like, what would be that? So that's where, in the Origins of High Point, I discussed, that's kind of what happened for High Point, is because of the cataclysm and everything else like that, there was the anomaly that formed, and essentially that anomaly at the center of High Point is a transition down to Phase. Now, again, that's not necessarily saying that canonically High Point is the universe of Phase from the book series, but it is a transition. It is a rip in the space-time continuum, the fabric of everything. Essentially, that is just a weak point, and that is part of the reason why I explained why High Point, the crystal sphere, is as big as it is. Because typically crystal spheres were always thought to be only about solar system size, and High Point is galaxy size. And part of that is because of this anomaly, this tear in the fabric of everything that connects Phase to High Point with this little, weakness. And then within that weakness, you can transition between the two. And that was how I thought of that idea of what would happen if you left Phase. And it's not so much that there is anything past there, but if you knew how to transition, maybe it's a doorway to other places. And one of the places happens to be High Point. So with that, that also means that it is a completely different type of dimension, right? Like second dimension, third dimension, fourth dimension level stuff, where if you think of, Phase as being flat and High Point as being, three-dimensional, it's almost as if you were transitioning to a completely different type of reality, as well as, the magic works differently and everything. So I extrapolated all of that to basically look at, because this ring was made with a material from the anomaly, it should have additional properties outside the norm. So what I decided to do was work this ring into being essentially a kind of having its own pocket dimension of sorts. So it's essentially pocketing the kinetic energy as potential energy. And in a way, it's just a complicated way of saying that the pocket dimension acts against the gravity of High Point, like the again, thinking of Phase as flat, meaning that gravity would work different, trying to equate that, idea between the conflict of physics, right? Like here we have potential and kinetic energy. You can take anything, raise it, and it has potential energy, because if you let it go, then all of that would turn into kinetic energy. So with that idea, trying to say, well, now we have a material from a different, place altogether who has different physics. I wanted to see if I could, mess with that idea. So the idea that you shove kinetic or potential energy into this ring and it's essentially amplified. It almost works against or with gravity, however you want to look at that. But by fusing it, it essentially takes the conflict of both the physics and it's amplifying the potential energy that you're storing into it. And then once it releases, you get to release that in, whatever direction you're going, but it's basically from the energy's perspective, it's constantly being accelerated. So when you finally release it, it's getting all of that, potential essentially being, I guess you could think of as almost being, raised to an impossible height to just, fall and kind of just, have an ever increasing terminal velocity. I don't know. It's really difficult when I try to put these things into words, because it makes sense, when I've put them together in terms of mechanics. But of course, trying to relay that to people has always been a challenge. But yeah, I've always liked the idea of what Dresden had presented with this ring, but I kind of wanted to just take it one step further and try to make sure that there was a mechanic that made sense. So the fact that the ring was made with, extra dimensional materials allowed for this this essential, acceleration of energies and or expansion of the stored potential energy. And then in my version, or at least, in the High Point lore, it was the creation of this ring, this prototype ring, that Dresden realized the concept of being able to store kinetic energy as potential energy. And using his knowledge of, plenty of other spells. I mean, you have like plenty of other spells that use pocket dimensions. You have, bags of holding, you have pockets of holding, or, deep pocket, the spell deep pockets. You have the other spell, the rope trick, that puts you in a pocket dimension. So there's a lot of inspirations for pocket dimensions that he was able to find. And basically, as a byproduct of something that happened with this ring that he almost basically created accidentally with this unique material, he was able to look at that and go, hey, I could probably recreate that with normal materials. And so essentially all of his current rings are essentially that. They are very low level, like deep pocket spells, but, the deep pocket is essentially just for energy. So he's able to put these tiny little, extra dimensions on these rings that can only store this kinetic energy at very low rates, and that's why, that's why the more powerful, the more it can siphon. But they'll never be as powerful as the other one, as the original, as the prototype, simply because the prototype, it was a byproduct of the conflicting physics that created this item, and then he's just able to reproduce it with other spells that, other aspects of using pocket dimensions for other spells. So yeah, that was probably not as eloquent or as, not confusing as I wanted it to be. But that's kind of, that was just something that I wanted to discuss because, he presented this item, and I thought it was kind of interesting that his own character is basically carrying around the same thing, just a different modified version. So I did kind of want to go into the history of it and just kind of give you guys some, more backstage view of how I do things in High Point, how I create things, how I've, gone through ideas, or how I get influenced by it. So yeah, that's basically how I took the Dresden Files, energy storing rings and made them my own, put them into my world, gave them, the same credit because it's still created by Dresden. Just changed up the history about why my version of Dresden came up with the idea. But it's also what we've talked about before. It's all about layering. It's not just having a good story and a good lore about why and where it was created. It's also about making sure that there's enough layers for exploration for my players, right? I have all these layers to make sure that the story makes sense if they ask, but they don't have to. It's not like this was a guaranteed campaign that he wants to go and discover all about this ring, but all of these details are there for him if he wants to go and discover them. If he wants to go and meet Dresden and talk about the ring, there's a whole thing potentially waiting for that, because if he ever meets Dresden and Dresden finds out he has that ring, Dresden may want that ring back, because again, Dresden was never supposed to give that ring away. It was that kind of material shouldn't just be out and about in the in High Point. He was kind of supposed to protect it, and it's just kind of gone. So he's hoping to get that back, and that would be kind of interesting if Dobbs ever found him. Because there would definitely be a conversation about getting that ring back. And also, little does Dobbs really know, but he is currently having a conversation with someone from the anomaly, and he knows it. And what's really interesting is, although there's a lot of reasons why the anomaly, or why this character that he's talking to wants to talk to him, because he's also met his father and everything, it also really helped that he has the ring on him. Because the thing also recognizes him and recognizes the ring. So it was kind of a dual aspect, but I don't think he's actually put that together yet. He knows that the character that he's talking to met his father. They've already had that discussion, but I don't think he's put two and two together about the ring. The difference is the character he's talking to has no interest in it and doesn't know the significance of him having it versus Dresden having it. So if you ever brought that brought that up in the conversation, that'd be interesting. But yeah, that's kind of just going under the radar right now, which is always fun to see. When you see like a glaring, like not plot hole, but when you see something glaring that's happening in the campaign or in the plot, and you're just like, I could say something, but that would disrupt the story and the way that it's headed. And I'm definitely the type of DM that's on the verge of, I will let my players do what they want to do and not try to sway them, because A, I just don't like railroading, and B, the story is better when they tell it. So yeah, he may or may not figure that out, but if he sees this, if he watches this episode, he'll probably he may or may not try to bring that up or not. It'll just really depend when we bring that gaming session back up to date. But yeah, anyway, I think that's going to be it for me, guys. I tried to make it to an hour. I almost did it. We're 5 minutes out, so I'll probably just try to make this outro a little bit. But yeah, sorry it's not going to be the normal 2.5 hour stream. Sorry it's not going to be super creative today. I did want to give you that little bit of insight on High Point. Wanted to go over this item. Wanted to keep the schedule. Didn't want to just cancel or, rest it out. Got to make sure we keep that consistency. But yeah, I'm beat. I'm both mentally and physically fried, and I still have like 3 straight days of this stuff to do. So hopefully by Friday, I will have a little bit of rest, because the container goes away on Friday, most likely Friday morning. So I have until Thursday to get everything done. So yeah, thanks for bearing with me. We will be back on Friday for more deeper discussions. Kage will be back. We will be finishing up. If everything goes according to plan, we should finish the Psionics Handbook. I know we've been saying that every single time, but based on the rate that we've been reading, and based on that we've already covered like half of the stuff that we're going to get into in this next section, we should be able to finish that up on Friday, and then that will lead into his build of a High Point Psionicist. And then he'll be back next Monday, which we will kick back off with all of the homebrew reviews that are coming up. We will make another post here in a day or two with the new updated list now that today's been posted. But yeah, we have so many weeks of homebrew review, so we will get back onto the normal scheduled viewer-submitted homebrew review next Monday. So meet us there for that. I'll be back, and so will Kage on Friday to continue with the Psionicists. And I will probably not be doing any game streaming this week. I would love to, but most likely as soon as I'm done with work, I'm going to be outside working all night. If I have any energy, I will try to pop on Wednesday for Hitman, but otherwise it'll probably be pretty quiet until Friday. So yeah, so be there for that. Hope we see you guys. Cosmic, Pokeniner, thank you guys so much for being here. It's always great to see you, keeping me company, and being in chat. If you guys like what you saw here today and want to see anything that you missed, or if you want to see any of my other episodes, we do have all of our live streams on our VOD channel. Cancel. We do have all of our live streams on our VOD channel on YouTube, so I'm going to post that link in the chat right now. So if you're interested, go ahead and check out our YouTube channel. It's not any edited content right now. It's just a VODs channel, so it's just mainly there for posterity, for future editing, and if you guys need to go check any episodes that you missed. If you want to submit any items for homebrew review for Mondays, or if you have a topic that you want to hear us talk about on Deeper Discussions on Fridays, go ahead and join our Discord. I'm posting that link in the chat right now as well. You can join our Discord. You can submit items, submit topics, submit questions, or just general talk to the community. We'd love to see you there. Yeah, we stream every Monday and Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Mondays, 7:30 Pacific Standard Time on Fridays. But yeah, that's just going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much. I wish I had more in me today, but I don't. But I wanted to be here for you, and I always appreciate you guys. So join me on Friday. Otherwise, that's going to be me for the rest of the week. Cheers.